Hello, I'm Lauren with IndoorGardening.com, and today we're going to talk about various propagation media. There are lots of different types of media out there that you can use to propagate your plants. Today we're going to be talking about the top 4 most available and most widely used ones and explain which ones work best for what plants and why you should be using them or not using them. First up is perlite. This is basically a rock that has been popped and has a whole lot of air pockets inside so that it can actually store water, it can store nutrients. If you go and buy some popular brands of perlite, you might notice that they actually have a fertilizer pre-mixed into them, so you don't have to worry about fertilizing your plants as well. This can be great for some plants. It is not so great for other plants when you're propagating, because if there is a fertilizer in that, it can actually cause root burn to new and developing roots. Just make sure that you are aware of the type of plant and if their roots are incredibly sensitive to this sort of thing, and it may or may not work out for you. In certain cases, it actually works out really well. Perlite can be used in a lot of different ways. The 2 most prominent propagation methods I have seen are using perlite at the bottom of a little shoebox or some type of sealed clear container. You dampen the perlite and you put it in the bottom, and then you put your propagations in, and then you just seal it up, and then you let your propagation sit in that very, very humid environment and grow from there. Another method I have seen is just having moistened perlite in a cup or a jar, no drainage whatsoever, and then you put your propagation in there from there, and it will grow and they'll root. This second method is especially really great for corms. So if you're growing alocasia corms, this is a fantastic method to do that with. It's also really great for Hoyas. Hoyas really, really love perlite, and this gives them quite a bit of aeration, and that enables them to be able to get that humid environment for their roots, but enough aeration that they're not going to rot. So a lot of woody stemmed type of plants will enjoy perlite as well. Water is really great for propagating pretty much anything. You just take a cutting of your plant, or you take a cutting of the plantlet. For example, if you were going to take a cutting of a spider plant, you would just snip off the little plantlet, just put it in a little cup of water, and in a few days to a week, it'll start to grow some roots for you. When they have secondary roots is when you want to start taking them out. So when they're big, thick, juicy roots and they're starting to have little extra roots coming off of them, that's when you can take them out of the water. They're basically fully propagated, and you can add them to something else. There are people that like to fully grow their plants in water though, so that's a whole other video, but it's very, very interesting that you don't have to always remove your propagations from the water. You can just continue to add nutrients to it depending on the plant. Next up, we have sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss is very similar to perlite in the sense that it can hold nutrients and it can hold water and then release that out and creates a very moist environment. Sphagnum moss is more moist than perlite though. So sphagnum moss is really great for those propagation boxes where you go and you put the sphagnum moss dampened in the very bottom of it, and then you just put your propagations in there, and then you close up the box and let your propagation sit in. Sometimes though, plants will rot in this because it is too moist of an environment. So you need to be wary of that and kind of pay attention. For example, plants that rot easily, like succulents, some of the specific Hoya types, Tradescantia, these are not really going to like sphagnum moss as a propagation media too much. They might prefer water or perlite because it allows more oxygen, more breathability, and you can also pay attention to them a little bit more because they're not kind of tucked in there too much. There are lots of other plants that enjoy a sphagnum moss prop box though, or just being propagated in sphagnum in general. Pretty much any philodendron will enjoy that for you. Also, if you have a pothos or epipremnum, begonia enjoy being propagated in sphagnum moss as well. Some Hoya enjoy being propagated in sphagnum moss. There's a lot of different types of plants out there that really enjoy that sphagnum moss. And there is another aspect to it where you can actually mix perlite and sphagnum moss to create aeration, making the sphagnum moss not as dense. And begonia especially really, really love this method. So if you're struggling with your begonia, you're trying to propagate begonia, it's not working out very well for you, try to do a propagation box but mix the sphagnum and the perlite. So you have a little bit more of that aeration and a little bit of extra moisture retention for you. And last but definitely not least is soil. Soil used to be widely used all the time. Then we started trying to come up with more eco-friendly ways, more efficient ways, and that's where these other methods that I have mentioned came from. But soil is still very, very efficient. It's just not talked about as much. Basically, our soils nowadays don't even really contain soil. They have a peat-based potting mix, or they have a clay-based potting mix, depending on the type of mix that you're getting for the most part. So when we use these, all we have to do in order to propagate with them is just snip off a bit of a plant, make sure that soil is moist, stick the plant in there, and let it continue to grow. The cutting will grow roots because that type of soil will hold on to the humidity and the moisture really, really well and allow that plant, as long as there is some type of node or whatever it needs, to grow some roots. The plant that this is used with the most and works the most efficiently with, in my personal experience, is Tradescantia. And this is how you get a full pot of Tradescantia, by using this soil propagation method. But you can also use it with things like philodendron, Serrapegia will do it as well. There will be times where people won't even make a separate pot. They will just take a vining plant and just loop it around the top of the plant, pin it in place, make sure to keep it moist for the next couple of days in a humid environment, and that is soil propagation as well. So it's still a very widely used and very efficient method. It's just not talked about very much when people specifically talk about propagation, so I felt that it should be discussed here today. Propagating plants can be a very rewarding method, and it can be a very easy way to get more plants, and using whatever materials you have available and knowing what plants work better with what type of propagation methods can really help you determine how best to make your new plants. And it is really fun to experiment, because what works great for one person in one environment will not necessarily work so well in another environment with another person. Because we all have our own little mini ecosystems inside our homes, and sometimes even breaking it down even more, inside the specific rooms in our homes will have different environments for our plants. So plants will behave differently in these environments, and being able to know which propagation methods are going to work better, and knowing which to try first and then going from there, or just knowing what is available to you, can make a huge difference. Make sure you check out indoorgardening.com while you wait for our next video. There's lots of information there for you. We're always happy to help. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!